We are recording.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar on trauma-informed biographical timelines with Sarah Buffy. We were able to launch our first training with Sarah last month, and she got rave reviews. We had over 35 people attend, and they were riveted by the material, by the information, by the energy in the room, and it was an excellent session. Lucky for everybody out there, there are 2 more sessions to come, and you can go to our website to find out where those are and how to register. In the meantime, let me introduce Sarah Buffy. She runs Soul Bird Consulting and is a social worker who specializes really in trauma, resiliency, and helping people who help all the other people. I wanted to say also, just to make sure I'm giving credit where credit is due, these trainings are free. They are sponsored by the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services and the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. They received a grant to work on the opioid epidemic in Ohio. And so the TIBT, or the Trauma-Informed Biographical Timeline Training, is one of several trainings and events that we are supporting throughout the state of Ohio. Go to our website if you'd like more information about these other events. But for now, let's go back to Sarah and find out how that training went and what frequently asked questions are out there.
So thanks, Bobby. All right. Hey, everybody. Very glad to be with you again. I had a wonderful time at the training. We had an all-day event, and it's just jam-packed with, like Bobby said, good energy from everybody in the room, and I think a lot of important learning. So we got a couple questions from people that we want to explore a little bit more about how we really can use the trauma-informed biographical timeline, what we're looking for. We're not just looking for adverse childhood experience and helping to understand those. We're also looking for resilience factors. So there were a lot of questions about what are resilience factors? What do you mean by that? So I'm going to take some time this morning to break down what we're talking about and then get to some of the more specific questions that people asked from the training. So let's jump on in here. All right. Oops. There we go. All right. So like I said, one of the first things that was asked is tell us more about resilience factors. So this is from the work of Valentine and Feinauer and also Mary Vicario, distilled down understanding from their research and their books about top 5 things that help people bounce back from traumatic experience or really help mitigate against the effects of trauma. The first resilience factor I want to talk about is voice, choice, and control. So the impact of trauma on these things is pretty significant. Usually when we experience trauma, either power is over us or our power is taken away. And a lot of that power comes from our ability to use our voice, wondering if our voice even matters. A lot of times people say no and their no is not respected. So that's something we want to think about when we're looking at the trauma-informed biographical timeline. The ACEs, or the traumatic experiences that we're recording below the line, will start to give us a picture of where someone's voice was silenced, where their choices were taken away, or if their choices didn't have any meaning, or when control was used over them in a negative sense. We're also looking for, and these are things we would record above the line, where someone uses their voice that we want to recognize, right? When someone has meaningful choices in their life and who is in their life to help them make those choices. And also, where does shared control actually happen? Some things I want to note here is this concept of hidden resilience. So a lot of times when I'm facilitating a timeline, especially of young people, I hear things like, oh, they are oppositionally defiant, right? Or just even the word defiance in general. When I hear that, what I'm really listening for is what is the hidden survival skill there? I just did a timeline recently, and the family was talking about how this young person, 3 or 4 years old, screamed, "I don't want to go," when she was in a transition from one parent to another, right? That's terrifying. What that's showing us is that kid is really, really scared. We recorded that incident underneath the line because that was a stress response of this young woman. But then I drew a line quickly straight above to start to notice the hidden resilience there was that child was using her voice. And when her caregivers believed her, honored her no, right? That is a huge resilience factor. That right there shows that that person not only had the capacity to say no, but she was actually believed. So those are the types of things we're looking at when we're looking at tracking resilience. There are also things we want to look for when we start to come to the second half of the timeline process, when we're actually looking at, okay, we know what we're up against, but what are we doing? We want to look at how we can build more voice, choice, and control in people's lives. How can we start to honor their no's and understand, not just say, oh, they're being defiant, but what are they trying to say? How can we honor that in a safe way? I also want to note about meaningful choices. A lot of times young people who have devalued labels, right, a mental health label, a complex trauma history, or developmental disability label, their choices are oftentimes things that are convenient to caregivers, not necessarily connected to the interests, passions, and gifts of the actual person. So looking at how do we help people create meaningful choice, a meaningful purpose in their life, that's going to help us bounce back from our traumatic experiences and help us get on our healing journey. This is sometimes tough. I hear people say, especially paid service folks say things like, well, it was their choice. It was their choice to wear that outfit or to not do that community event, etc. And I understand that. I understand we need to honor when people say yes or no, but I also ask people to look a little bit further. Did that choice have actual meaning around it? Was that person given too many choices and it was overwhelming? Were they given no choices so they felt controlled, right? To offer 2 or 3 choices connected to the person's passions, their gifts, their interests, that's what helps really ascribe meaning to that choice. And then we can help people make positive, safe choices that will really enhance their life. Trying to help people thrive, not just survive. Also, Michael Small, who was cited in the person-centered planning era, he's in John and Connie Lyle O'Brien's book about person-centered planning. He says, in reciprocal relationships, control is shared. So a lot of times, especially with young people, there's an effort to control or manage behavior. I understand how we need to keep a situation safe. We sometimes feel as caregivers, we need to keep things under control, but the unintended consequences of that are someone feeling that power over and over, which then exacerbates a traumatic experience. So what we're looking at is how can we have power with the people that we're supporting and create relationships and choice where control is a shared discussion. It's not just one person having power or control over another. Let's see, I wish I had you all on the camera right now so I could answer more questions around that. But what I really want to emphasize with this resilience factor is this is the foundation. If I don't feel like my voice matters, if I don't have meaningful choice in my life, and I feel like every decision coming from when I wake up to where I live to what I eat is controlled, what you will see inadvertently are what we call behaviors. We'll see people trying to use their voice in any way possible when their voice is taken away. So as you're doing the timeline, you want to look for where does the person exhibit voice, choice, and control in their life. And if you find that they don't have a lot in their life, when we come to the approaches section, we're really going to try to emphasize how can we help people build more of these things. All right, the next resilience factor is self-esteem. And this is broken down. Mary Vicari, my mentor, helped break this down into 3 different parts here. The first being sense of self. As I'm facilitating a timeline process, I'm starting to look for what messages has this person been given throughout their life, and how might that affect their sense of self, their self-esteem. Oftentimes, if people have their voices taken away, they haven't had choices, they haven't had a lot of control over their life, their sense of who they are is really kind of discombobulated. So the first thing we can do when we're in a support role in someone's life is start to help them develop what are their personal preferences. Oftentimes I work with people and they say, oh, they don't like anything, whoever they are, right? And I always say, great, if we know what we don't like, we can start to figure out, what do we like? So when you're working with someone who's had a tough time and they have a lot of no's, I don't like this, I don't like that, the first thing you want to do as a safe person in their life is to really honor that experience. Not try to convince them that, oh, you should try or you should like, right? It feels like our experience is being dismissed if everyone's always trying to change our mind. So to honor, hey, you've shared a lot of things you don't like. Thanks for being so open about that. I wonder if there are some other things we could try. And if you don't like them, we can know that, and we can stand firm in that feeling and experience. When we give people the opportunity to say no, their brain is able to make space for all of the yeses, right? So helping people understand, what do you like, what do you not like, what really makes you unique, that's what helps to start to develop our sense of self. Traumatic experiences take away our understanding of who we are. So this is a great place to start. The next part of self-esteem is self-efficacy, right? Self-efficacy is the belief in my ability to succeed or accomplish a task. So one thing I like to ask caregivers is, think of something that you put your mind to and that you actually accomplished, that you actually did. This is a great question to ask in reflection, to think about, what messages was I given throughout my life that told me from an internal space that I can accomplish my goals. Usually those messages came from positive, safe adults in my life, from positive experiences. If I've had a lot of trauma in my life, I usually have a poverty of experience. I haven't been exposed to a lot of things that help me define who I am and what do I enjoy. I also might not have a lot of experience of wanting to do something and then actually being able to carry that out. So helping people accomplish small, measurable goals, to celebrate those small successes, really starts to build that internal sense of, I can make a change on my environment. Again, as you're looking through the timeline process, as you're tracking different experiences, you might see kids who are living in an environment where they cannot leave. They cannot make a change on their environment. So that tells us, they have not had a brain that has given the message that they can think something and carry it out. So what they need is help with a safe adult to make those changes that they want later on in life. That can start now, though, and it can start with little tiny choices. Like think about homework, right? Homework can be very frustrating. If we feel like, if young people feel like they're not good at math or things are tough, it's a lot easier to say, I hate this math, and kind of have a defiant response to that, than to say, please help me, I'm feeling very vulnerable, this math is giving me anxiety, right? That's a lot of language, that takes a lot of thinking brain capacity. What we need to do is honor when someone shuts down with a tough task, and then help them practice, what does it feel like to accomplish something? Building up self-efficacy is really important in building resilience. The last tier under the bucket of self-esteem is self-worth. If I don't care about myself, and that has come from messages that I've been given through my traumatic experiences, that I don't matter, I need to start learning how I can care about myself. I need to connect with safe people who love me. I need to be able to be heard and valued for who I am. And I also need something that we call descriptive praise. So evaluative praise is where you say, good job, that's beautiful, way to go. But what that does is it feels good, but it also puts my self-esteem and my self-worth dependent on your appreciation and validation of me. With descriptive praise, what we do is we describe exactly what we see the person doing with a real positive energy, right? So instead of nice job cleaning the kitchen, you would say, you put all the dishes away and you put the forks where they went, and then you cleaned the pans, and here we are ready to close down and get ready for bed. So those are just all facts, but it was with positive energy. It's a tough exercise, right? It seems like something easy to do, but it can be, it's an extra or a muscle we really need to build. When we describe what people are doing with positive energy, that starts to build an internal sense of self-worth that gives me the message that I matter. And that's a message that if I didn't get early on in childhood, we can give that message to kids now and adults, right? Anyone that we're supporting. Our sense of self our self-efficacy, and self-worth. These are 3 things we want to look for as we're charting out where does this person have resilience in their life. And when we see an absence of these in the timeline process, we want to look at how can we build these through our approaches, our trauma-informed approaches. The next resilience factor we're looking for and looking to build more of is external supports. So these can be experiences. If I have a really positive memory from my past that I'm holding on to today, that could be an external support. Objects, right? Things or objects that I kind of carry around. Some young people, they carry plushies or fidgets or things with them to and from places, and a lot of times schools or caregivers say, hey, we can't take those things here. We don't want you to have those. It disrupts the environment. What we're doing inadvertently, if we take away someone's external supports, is we're taking away that one thing that might help them feel safe in the moment. So what we're looking for as we hear stories throughout the timeline process are there things or people or objects that someone is fixating on that maybe doesn't make sense to us, but we can start to recognize those as external supports. Things outside of us on whom we can rely for support or some sort of felt sense of safety. I hear a lot of stories about, like I just said, about things or fidgets that are taken away because we're trying to have order in a classroom or in a group home or a workshop. But what that might be doing is not recognizing that that's an object that helps the person feel safe. So that's where we're looking for hidden resilience. How might this thing that I don't understand actually help someone feel safe? We can also ask that to young people instead of just assuming that they're trying to be distracting in our spaces. So some other external supports are our sense of spirituality. If someone has a real groundedness in whatever their faith practices are, that can be something we can look to build up and find connection in. Also pets, sometimes when we have something or someone else to care for, like pets or plants, we're able to give and nurture that young thing that we're helping grow. That can give us a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose. It also can give us a sense of relationship if human relationships have not been safe. So this is something we can help build up. And again, the last thing there, fidgets, just things that young people hold on to. I was working with a group, and they were looking to do a timeline process for young kids who are going to be taken out of the home to sent to a provider for some respite care for a week or 2 at a time so the family can start to stabilize and kind of get back on track. And the suggestion was, after the timeline process, was for the provider and the group home roommates and staff to make a scrapbook of all their positive memories. So this young person could take that with them back home when they went back into their environment. I got a report that they did the scrapbook. They also had quotes about what all the roommates, what this person meant to them, how they really enjoyed their presence, things that they contributed to their lives. And this young person has taken his scrapbook to his home and back again. It's his transitional object to and from these different environments so that he can hold on to something that helped him feel safe. It's helped him to stay calm and regulated and help those transitions go a little bit smoother. Transitions previously for this young man were very difficult. That's what we found in the timeline process. Every time there was a transition, there was a disruption, there was a dysregulation, right? So to have a transitional object, an external support, has really helped him feel a little bit calmer to and from his environment. So that's an example. But again, and with all these resilience factors, we're looking at where do we see these as we're tracking the timeline, and how can we build more of these to help people get a felt sense of safety as we join them on their journey. Oh, a story about shoes. So there's a young man who was in it was like an institution. So he wasn't in foster care yet. He was waiting for a foster care placement. And his support people at the institutional setting were really frustrated by his obsession with shoes. Didn't understand it. It was very distracting. Every time someone came into the room, he would go to their shoes. He would get really obsessed. And so their traditional approach was to take away shoes, right? If he's obsessed with it, we need to take it away. We need to minimize the obsession. When we were able to do a trauma-informed biographical timeline, it came out through the conversation that when he was younger, His family was having a lot of tough times supporting him. They had their own issues with mental health and depression, and their coping mechanism was to lock this young man in his room in between meals. So that's all the stimulation he had, is with whatever was in his room. And what we realized through anecdotes from the family was that there were boxes of shoes in this young man's bedroom. That's what was in his closet. So this young man spent a lifetime, which felt like years and years, locked in his room when he wasn't at school, right? And wasn't eating meals with the family. And the only connection he had were these shoes. They became his sense of meaning, or his system of meaning. Those shoes were his external supports. So when he was taken out of the home and sent to the institution, whenever he saw shoes, it reminded him of the thing that he had to connect with when he was isolated and neglected in his bedroom. All of the staff, after this trauma-informed biographical timeline, left with huge amounts of empathy and said, if I would have known, I would have bought him shoes. I would have given him my shoes over and over again. I wouldn't have had the traditional approach of take away, right? I'm not advocating for boxes of shoes to be delivered to this young man. What I'm advocating for and what I'm interested in highlighting is, can we look at someone's survival skills as a survival skill, not as a behavior to be managed, but something to be understood and to be curious about, so we can understand how to support that person versus take more control over their life. This young man, now that shoes aren't a consequence, right, is able to feel a little bit safer in his world because this isn't used as a punishment against him. Not everything's perfect, but we're starting to understand a little bit more about people based on what we hear from the timeline process. All right, still going here. I think the most important resilience factor, and it's coming forth on their list, but I think it's one of the most important things I've seen, is helping people experience a sense of belonging. Oftentimes, when we're doing the trauma-informed biographical timeline, we see that people either have no sense of belonging, no sense of connection to community, they're extremely isolated, or their belonging comes with segregation and congregation based on a devalued label. What that means is folks who have a developmental disability label or a mental health label have service providers that suggest groups based on a devalued label. Here's where all the people with this certain disability are spending time, socially or educationally or et cetera, right? That is going to happen whether we try to make it happen or not. Our hope with folks who are facilitating timelines are to help to get to know a person. What are their gifts? What are their interests? What are their passions? And who are the groups or the people that share those same gifts, interests, and passions, right? So not segregated, but working with groups who have a connection to a shared passion. That's really what we're looking for. If you're doing the timeline process and you see that Johnny is a part of a soccer club that everyone else in the community is a part of, right? And the typical folks are a part of, that's something we want to highlight, is something to continue to build on. Also, if you hear in the timeline process that little Johnny loves, Pokemon cards, right? If that comes up, that's not something random. That's something we want to highlight, we want to circle, and when we get to the approaches section, we want to say, all right, if he loves Pokemon, where are the other people who love Pokemon? How can we start to engage them in community and conversation and starting to build that shared interest, not just all this focus on behaviors to be managed or things to be fixed, right? Most folks that I work with, we go through the timeline process, and I can use a lot of the trauma-informed approaches to help them start to heal and feel safer in their bodies. But if we don't get connected to people and places in their community that share their gifts, interests, and passions, their healing plateaus. There's only so much work we can do around fixing someone or helping someone start to heal that doesn't have to do with passion. That will only go so far. When I get people connected to their community, that sense of belonging, I watch people's shoulders go back, they stand taller, they start to have a different identity. I'm a volunteer, I'm a coach, I'm an office manager, right? Whatever these valued roles are, that's what we're looking to build in people's lives, right? Not just the healing interventions, but how do we find a sense of belonging? So there's a difference between showing up and belonging. showing up, right? If I go to a coffee shop once in a while, I show up, the barista doesn't know my name, no one there knows who I am, right? I'm patronizing the place, but there's no relationship building. Belonging is when people see us and their eyes light up. They know our names, right? Think about Cheers, right? When you walk into a place where everyone knows your name. That's really what we're looking for. And we can have a higher probability of belonging if we go to shared ordinary places consistently, and we have a connection to that place based on our neighborhood or our gift, right? So the coffee shop that I go to now, not only do the baristas recognize my face, but there are other patrons there who go there consistently that I can have a chat with, right? I can start to build those relationships. Right now, they're just acquaintances, but because I go places consistently in my neighborhood, I have the capacity to build those relationships, acquaintances, into actual friendships. So these things take time, but this is where the real work is. Anyone who is in someone's life, paid or unpaid, if they spend time with a person, right, the question is, how might I shift how I spend my time? 8 hours sitting on the couch while someone's messing around on their phone is one way to get paid as a direct service professional, right? But another way is to use those same 8 hours to go explore the neighborhood and start to get connected to where I might have some meaning in my life, connected to my gifts, my interests, and my passions. I'm putting this note here. It says starting with self, because a lot of times we ask people who are socially isolated themselves to go help someone else build community. Right? So instead of just looking at the person you're supporting and helping them get connected to their neighborhood, it can be helpful to look at our own lives. What's going on in my neighborhood? Where do I contribute? Where do I have a sense of meaning and belonging? If I can have that felt experience myself, I have a higher chance of helping someone else get that same experience. The last resilience factor that I'm going to talk about right now is positive, safe adults. Now, healing happens in relationship. We know that, we understand that. When we're looking at the trauma-informed biographical timeline, oftentimes it's human beings in the person's life that have caused or contributed to those hurt feelings, right? Those hurt experiences. So it can be tough to build positive, safe relationships. But if I'm in someone's life, I have the capacity to be that positive, safe adult, right? And hundreds of studies show, and hundreds of people who have had tough experiences will say, it was that one teacher, it was that one coach, it was that one person in my life who I felt safe and connected with, and that's what helped me overcome, right? So even if we have a hard time building all these other resilience factors, when we can be positive, safe people in people's lives, that will help them get on their healing journey. But we can't be endpoints, right? If I am an endpoint in someone's life, if I'm in someone's life and I don't connect them to other people who share their gifts, interests, and passions, I think that my work is sometimes in vain. So the invitation is, how can we be conduits to other safe relationships? What I mean by that is, if I am in someone's life, I'm supporting them, I see through their trauma-informed biographical timeline that they've had a lot of tough experiences, they don't have a lot of resilience. What I'm looking to build, or how can I use my capacity as a connector, my ability to communicate, get curious, Google things literally in the person's neighborhood. How can I use my ability to be a connector to enhance that person's life? And it's not just doing that for someone, but it's also with. A lot of my time is spent at coffee shops where I'm sitting with the person, I've gotten to know them, and then together we're Googling, where might we get involved? How can we volunteer? What's going on in our neighborhood? And then I can use my capacity as a conversationalist, or as a person who has a car to drive around, right? I can use my skills to help be a bridge between people and the other people in their community who they can start to build a relationship with. We save this one for last, not because it's less important, but because we want to emphasize that all of these other resilience factors are going to be the foundation to help build more positive, safe people in people's lives. One thing I skipped over was the power of one. That yes, even one person, we as individual people in people's lives have the capacity to help people on their healing journey. Doesn't just stop at us though. We have to start to build social capital. All right. I added this kind of as a little joke. I was working at a large mental health agency, and there was a big emphasis on the golden thread. What the golden thread they were talking about was that a diagnosis matches the plan, the interventions, which matches the goals and matches the evaluation of the goals, and it was all this stuff about the plan. I want to emphasize not just the plan, but the person. I like to look at the golden thread of relationships. I've worked with a lot of people who I find, even if I can just know one thing about them, I can start to look where we might get connected and follow that thread. Who starts to get excited about the two of us showing up in a space? Who starts to get a little bit curious? That's the relationship thread that I want to start to follow. So that's my little soapbox message there. So those are the resilience factors. We will hopefully be able to explore those deeper and in other contexts. But for right now, I want to orient us to two things that we have on the website. They're the TIBT book list, which is here that Bobby Beal has annotated for us. You can find this on the website. There will be links to this at the end of this webinar. But there's a whole list of books and a little bit about them that really we think are helpful in building up your capacity as a facilitator to understand what you're hearing from people, the traumatic experience, also on how to build resilience factors. There's also a Google Me list that we referenced in the training that we'll keep building on, but this is the Google Me list. Again, it's links and authors and books and resources to help us start to build up our capacity as facilitators to carry on meaningful discussions. As a trauma-informed biographical facilitator, you're not just helping the process move forward, you're also helping explain things that you hear along the way. So these two resources are out there for you. Happy reading to everyone here. Okay, so we had a couple questions from you guys. So I'm gonna dive in here. There was interest about, tell us about a success story. How has the trauma-informed biographical timeline really helped? What have you seen? So I want to tell a story. Well, first of all, I worked for the Resilience Project for 2 years, and I'm still a consultant on that project. And every single person that I worked with 12 people one-on-one, kind of as a social therapist. My main goal was to build resilience factors. And every single person I worked with, we were looking at we first started out with that trauma-informed biographical timeline, and that's then what got me on my path to help supporting them. So I have to say, it influenced how for me, it was a success story for everyone because I was able to, I'm gonna pause right here. So Matt, for the video, I see it.
Resume.
Okay. All right, so we got a lot of questions from you guys kind of about the process. So I'm gonna dive into some of those now. The first one was, what has been a success story? How has the trauma-informed biographical timeline influenced the work that I've seen with people? For me, every single timeline that I have been a part of has been a success because what happens is we start the timeline process based on a call of, hey, I am having a hard time supporting this person. That's the invitation to even get into the room. So when we can sit with all the support people in the room and start to have a new discussion on what we're seeing, how have previous life experiences affected the brain and body, and what can we do to help, what that does immediately is raises the empathy of every single person in the room. We have these aha moments of, oh, they're not bad, they're hurting, right? Not what's wrong with you, but what happened to this person and how can we help? So I have seen major success just by walking out of the room with a new ability and new capacity to step in people's lives in a helpful way. The results that I've seen through working, right, so the follow-up, coming back every month and looking at how are we doing, what kind of resilience factors are we building. I want to share one story about a woman named Sarah. So this is Sarah's actual name because she's agreed to have her story out there. We're going to add a link to a story that we did through the Resilience Project, kind of looking at her world. But when we first were introduced to Sarah, everyone in her life really was looking at her behavior and trying to manage what was going on, which I understand. Sometimes when people are exhibiting things that are harmful to themselves or others, sometimes all we know is how to manage the situation. So we got into the room, we started to understand her trauma history. From that, what I realized was Sarah had not had a lot of voice, choice, and control in her life. And when she was telling different stories, when she was sharing, she was kind of in a reenactment state where she was telling stories that seemed really fantastical to a lot of people. The traditional approach was stop lying, stop making up stories, stop telling stories, right? That's what she was met with. What we understood through the timeline, the message that she was being given is your voice doesn't matter. When really it was, I don't understand your voice. So as a person who was look in her life to build resilience factors, I was able to show up and start to hear her in a new way. Not only hear her, but give her the message of feeling seen and heard for what she was sharing. A lot of what she was sharing, again, were kind of these fantastical stories. And when I started to understand them, I realized that she was trying to share how she was a helper in people's lives. Right? How she was contributing to people's lives. Sorry, I'm going to pause here. This is getting pretty long-winded. Let me
resume.
All right, so you've got the book list and the Google Me list. These are going to be great resources here. But then I want to take us to some of your questions. One of the first questions that was asked was, can you tell us a success story? How has the trauma-informed biographical timeline helped as in getting people on the same page to get into helps that? Sorry, Matt, I'm gonna go back again.
That's okay. I'm not even gonna pause. You can, whenever you're ready, just go right in.
Okay. So I want to start to get to some of your questions. There were a couple questions that were asked about the process.
Hold on 1 second. Give me a little more quiet before you kick back in, so I got a nice edit space, okay?
I'm gonna clap. Ready? All right. So I want to get to some of your questions. That you asked after the first trauma-informed biographical timeline training. And the one that really stuck out to me the most was, what has been a success story? The question being, tell us about how the timeline process really helped someone on their healing journey. So the three things I want to point out. One, no matter what timeline I have facilitated or been a part of, there's always a major success just from doing the process. And that success is it's a process that builds people's empathy for the person they're supporting, they're caring for. A lot of times we come into the room pretty drained, pretty defeated, and the process, looking at things chronologically, connecting dots, and really looking at how can we start to build resilience, it gives people these aha moments to say, okay, not what's wrong with this person, but what happened to them, what did they do to survive, and how can we help? So just by engaging in the process, I've seen success because it helps the caregiver have a little, kind of a new lease on life. The second thing was, I'll tell a story about a woman named Sarah. There's a video about Sarah online that we're going to add to the end of this webinar. And what you'll see in that video are two things that really came out of the timeline process. What I realized in the timeline is Sarah spends a lot of time in segregated settings. She goes to a day program. She spends time with Special Olympic bowling. She spends time with other people who have labels of disability or mental health. And all those things are fine, but it was keeping her segregated and isolated. And the loneliness that she was experiencing was contributing to her quote unquote behavior, those actions that we see that display that people need connection, right? And a lot of times we say, oh, they're just attention seeking. Well, hell yes, someone is attention seeking if they didn't get the attention that they deserved and needed as they were growing up. So as a group, we were able to see how neglect had affected Sarah's brain and body. And as a support person, I was able to walk out of that room and get to work on things that really mattered. I understood that Sarah had a great desire to help and to contribute to other people. And so instead of keeping that contribution just connected to her day program or other segregated settings, we started to look, where could she contribute in her community? So we started volunteering together at Kane, which is a food pantry in our city. Church is active in Northside. We went through the process just like any other volunteer would go through the process. We filled out an application. We took a tour of the food pantry. We started to get to know the other people there and started to figure out what are ways that we could contribute our gifts to the food pantry. To my knowledge, Sarah is still there volunteering every Thursday. We went every Thursday for 2 years and contributed our gifts. And through that, we developed a sense of belonging. Every time we would walk in, there would be a, hey, Sarah's, because we both shared the same name, right? Glad you're here. They had special jobs that they kept just for us because we were able to do a lot of the hands-on things that some of the other folks couldn't do. We got letters in the mail thanking us for our help. There were all kinds of ways that our contribution was acknowledged. Now, you hear me using the word our. Independence is a myth. Independence is social isolation. What's important from the timeline process and our approaches afterwards is that we do things with people, not just have people be alone, right? A lot of folks with labels and who've had complex trauma histories spend enough time alone. We have the opportunity to be safe people in people's lives to start to build connection and relationship in the community. So we were able to build a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging at Churches Active in Northside. We were also able to start to build some positive, safe relationships. So one of the things Sarah decided she wanted to do was do a cookout fundraiser to raise money for the food pantry. With all the planning process, we were able to, one, help Sarah build up choices and use her voice in a way that mattered to her, right? We chose what kind of food we were going to have, what park we were going to have the barbecue in. We were able to invite people who she had met, old friends and new, and there was a great turnout of people who were able to have a good time together and raise money to contribute back to the food pantry. It was the timeline process that helped give us the awareness of belonging, positive, safe relationships, and meaningful choices were absent in Sarah's life. And through the process of looking to build resilience factors, we were able to hone in where meaning could really be the focus of our work together, not just checking off boxes for a certain plan. So I have dozens of more success stories, but I do really just want to emphasize that the empathy level of people really raises quite a bit just through the timeline process. There were several videos that were made based on the Resilience Project, so we're going to add a link to those, like I said, on the website after this, so stay tuned for those. Okay, another question. Relationships seem key, but what if building relationships seem impossible because of how people have been hurt in the past, right? So a lot of what I talk about is build relationship, build relationship. Usually, folks who, again, the trauma that we experience is from other human beings. So we crave relationship, we crave connection, but also connection or relationship can be really scary. It can trigger past memories of when people had power over us or hurt us. So the one thing I want to emphasize here is, one, go back and look at all the other resilience factors, right? Helping people build up their sense of self-esteem, their preferences, their ability to contribute to other people, right? That's going to be really key. When I start to feel like I matter, right? I have control over what I say yes to and what I say no to. It helps me feel a little bit safer in my ability to engage in relationship with other people, right? When my yeses and nos are honored, when I start to have a positive self-esteem. So really one thing we want to look at is if relationships have been unsafe, how do we help people build up other resilience factors to equip them to have healthy, safe relationships? Also, as we're entering into people's lives, when we notice that closeness starts to trigger people and people start to reject us in relationship, what we can do as safe people is to honor that pushback. Hey, it seems like you're not feeling safe right now. Thanks for letting me know. I'll be here when you're ready to talk about things, when you're ready to reconnect. What we want to do is help give people a new experience with what does it mean to be in relationship, right? So if someone rejects us or starts to push us away and we read that as a sign of, oh, they don't want to spend time with me anymore, what we're going to do inadvertently is really repeat the pattern and show them that relationships aren't safe. I'm going to push people away and they're going to abandon me. What we can do as safe people is start to be consistent in people's lives, no matter what's going on with them, so they can start to get a new neuronal network for, I can have a hard time and people will still love me. That's the message that we want to start to give to people. Another question was, about the actual facilitating the timeline process. I want to get started on facilitating these timelines. I believe the process will be helpful, but I don't know if I'm ready. Great awareness. If you don't think you're ready to facilitate the process, that's okay. What I would suggest doing is find someone to partner with. Is there someone in your network who does feel confident with this process? Are there people that you can ask, hey, can I join you in a timeline that you're facilitating so I can start to learn more from you, right? The facilitation is about content, but it's also about process. So really to be an expert in both would be awesome, right? But sometimes to know about the process and to feel comfortable with facilitating a group can be really key. And when you have those big questions of how specific traumas affect the brain and body, that's why you have that paper on the wall for questions for an expert, right? You can note those and follow up with people afterwards. If you don't know if you're ready, reach out to people to get support. The buddy system is really key. Another question here. Can trauma-informed biographical timelines be helpful for adults as well as children? Yes. This series that we're talking about is focusing on how to facilitate a timeline for a young person. A lot of folks that I support are well into adulthood, and they're in these kind of the hamster wheels of services that are ineffective. And so there's this big timeout. Hey, can you come into our world, help facilitate a timeline so we can get on a new path with this person, right? Working with adults is equally as powerful as using the timeline process for children. There was a question about resilience factors versus resilience approaches. So with the Resilience Project, which was birthed out of Hamilton and Claremont County, we focus on building 5 resilience factors that you just heard about. We also have trauma-informed approaches that help build resilience, help people have a sense of voice, choice, and control in their life based on different trauma-responsive interventions. A list of these, or different videos of these, can be found on the website. Again, I'm orienting you to the web page after this that will be, you'll see it on the end of this webinar. But there's a series of videos that Mary Vicario and I did that really describe the different resilience approaches. Some things you may have heard before are reflect, honor, connect. This is a way of listening and communicating to someone that really leans into a felt sense of safety, a felt sense of being seen and heard, not just fixing or controlling a person, right? So reflect, honor, and connect. You'll see a video on that. There's also a video I want to highlight. It's called the 3 Ps, predict, practice, and plan B. And this is an approach to help people if transitions are tough for them. So I'll orient you to those videos, and they'll describe a little bit more detail the purpose and then how to use those with someone you're supporting. Also, if you want more information on those, you can email myself or Bobby, and we can get you some handouts that will get you on the right path there. Let's see. All right, there were no other questions. I do have a resource here. This is Valentina Finehour's work that where Mary Vicario got the resilience factors. But at this point, I want to bring back Bobby to help close us down and just appreciate everyone and their time and energy. Look forward to more trainings.
Thank you, Sarah. It's been helpful as always, and I encourage people to go to our website. Let me grab that for you right now. Sorry, Matt. Here we go. You want to go to wraparoundohio.org and look for the Healthy Kids Learning Community information, where you'll see Sarah have links to these webinars and know how to register for the next training. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thank you.